Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Beth, thank you for that lovely music. Good morning. Good morning. Hi. My name is Marjorie Wormser. I am your Sunday associate for this morning. There's so much excitement in this room. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to have you all here. So, for those of you who are watching on Zoom or Facebook this morning, there was a special coffee hour, and a lot of people had cupcakes and sugar, and so that might be contributing to some of the excitement. You'll hear more about the reason for the celebration later in this service. So welcome to the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, where we covenant together to weave the fabric of community from the strands of our separate lives. We are an inclusive, welcoming, dynamic, vibrant, justice-seeking congregation, and whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. We adhere to the principles of Unitarian Universalism, which you can find on a newcomer card that's in the pocket of the seat directly in front of you. And if you are a visitor or a newcomer today, please feel free to take that with you. This is a great time to silence phones and any other noise-making device. They have a habit of ringing and dinging and sounding when we least expect it. And now we have a tribute from our Reverend Joel Miller.
So just before this service, in between this service and the 9:30 service, we had a celebration and dedication of the new roof. The roof is basically done, some gutter work left to be done. It looks really great. And from what I can tell with the history of the congregation, it may be the first time in the history of the fellowship that the roof won't be leaking. So, yeah. It's, I have to tell you how on Friday I was at a meeting of Unitarian Universalist ministers in New Jersey and metropolitan New York and the suburbs up along the Hudson. And I met two ministers out of the 30 ministers that were attending. Two of the ministers became Unitarian Universalists here. Now, I started counting up in my head and I realized, wait a minute. And then there's Mandy, and then there was, at least 5 that I can just think of off the top of my head. That's very impressive. Not every congregation brings people into Unitarian Universalism so compellingly that they go on to minister from the experiences they've had. So I want to tell you, as a part of this testimony, because Shari Lowe and Franklin Heller asked me to share with you today about their work and why I feel so strongly about it. As an interim minister, when I'm interested in serving a congregation, one of the things that I know is that the congregation is in this place where things feel a little like there's a lot of change going on, and you guys have a lot of change going on. I mean, Allison moving on to Portland, and you're just finishing the roof. You just recently finished that cool new entrance. It looks great. The parking lot looks great. And I have to tell you, when I was looking at the fellowship, interviewing in that very quick 2-week period that interims and congregations get matched up, I did a Google Street View, and I saw, this cool building and a muddy parking lot. And when I got here, it was like, whoa, look at that. It looks really great. Parking lot. And I was reading about your strategic plans, thoughtful, judicious planning for where you would like to go. And then I learned as I arrived, I was excited to come here and be with you. I'll be honest, as an interim, I don't want to, it's a lot of work to travel, to move, end up somewhere, and then have a congregation say, oh, we just like things as we are. We don't really need to do much in the world. I grew up in a congregation that saved my life. I've seen this congregation save lives. You're going to hear that from me a lot in the rest of our time together. But I saw what you are committed to do, what you are just about to launch into doing with a new wing. And is it kind of scary and daunting? Yeah, I bet it is. But I came here because I see in you such generosity and such commitment to each other and to the world and to your youth and children. I wanted to be a part of this. And then when I saw Charilo and Helene Firm came and met with me at one point to show me the plans, and it was really exciting. And then they said, would I be willing to pledge to the campaign? Right? I want to tell you that even though by the time that new space is dedicated, it's very possible I will be serving a new congregation and may not be able to come for the dedication. That's not a lament, because I did pledge, and I made a pledge that reflects my excitement for what you aspire to do as a congregation. I think the greater risk that you face is not in the building. It's not in building. It's not following the call you have to your ministry and to the difference you make in each other's lives and to the lives of the people in this world. And I wanted to pledge to that, even though I may never even be in the pulpit, because I know you're going to keep saving lives. Let me tell you, I was happy to share that testimony with you this morning about your Deeper Roots, Whiter Wings campaign. You guys are cool.
I have a few brief announcements to share, and information about these and other announcements can be found on our website at muuf.org/calendar/. So at 12:45 p.m. today, the Odyssey program will feature Steve Runyon. Please join us in the meeting room or watch the live stream on YouTube. There is still a need for additional children's religious education teachers. The greatest need is for the pre-K first grade group. Those are 3 to 5 year olds, I believe, as well as 6th and 7th graders. So they're probably between 11 and 13. And if you're interested, please reach out to Nick Walwork. I don't see Nick here, but Nick is our Director of Religious Education, and he can be reached at nwallwork, WALLWORK, @muff.org. Finally, the Fund Committee is starting Meals with You Friends 2023. If you are interested in restaurant get-togethers with fellowship members, friends, newcomers, please complete and return a registration form. There's a box out in the welcome table area of the Great Hall and forms that you can fill out to be part of this exciting way to get to know people a bit better outside of our Sunday services. And thank you.
They were handing out these fun Valentine's necklaces as a part of the celebration for the dedication this morning. And The kids were grabbing a lot of them and looking at them, very happy to have them. One of the things interim ministers especially observe about congregational life is that congregations have their own personality, their own soul, if you will. I don't really know what soul is, but I have an experience of it. You know, when I walk in the door of a congregation, and you can just feel by looking at how folks tend to their place and how the facility itself has been adapted to be welcoming or not sometimes. And congregations have their own personalities and how in places where they're strong and places sometimes where they're always going to have something that's a little they're going to always have to work around. When I was a young minister, a mentor of mine talked about a congregation that he had served in Massachusetts. It was a Unitarian Universalist congregation, but it became Unitarian Universalists, as many in that area did in the 1820s, but it had been around since the late 1600s. And when he was researching the history of his congregation, he'd realized that they had built, I think it was 6 buildings in their almost 400 years of history. And one of the first building they built a nice wood frame building, but everybody didn't want to have to go through the front door, and in those days you rented a pew and they got to be your family pew. So everybody started putting in doors into the side of the building so they could just sneak in, and maybe no one would notice they were late or maybe leaving early because the sermons were about 2.5 hours. Right? I promise never to do that. And after a while, the entire lower wall of the church building was all doors. And eventually the building just went and fell over. I think it was the next 5 buildings, they just didn't take care of their buildings. And so it was about 1993 that my mentor finally said to the congregation, you could change that. You could do it a different way, you know. And interim ministers like to offer those possibilities to congregations. I saw it once when I was serving a congregation in Buffalo, a congregation that's dear to me. It was the first congregation I served that wasn't one that I'd started, basically. And old congregation with a wonderful building, but getting into the building was really hard. And it always felt a little kind of cool when you walked in, like this is a hard group to break into. And they actually weren't, but it felt that way. And they did a reconstruction project and built a beautiful new foyer on the outside. And it was night and day, the difference for visitors' experience. Visitors, people who had joined the church recently would talk about, I'd walk through the doors and I'd be like, ooh, can I come through here? It was kind of dark, felt a little foreboding. The new entryway was light. You could see into everything. And the new visitors would talk about, wow, I'm so glad I found this place. Interesting the way our sacred spaces shape our soul spaces. I love the way, and one of the joys of being with you is walking in and seeing you gathered here with your great energy and this great sense that I will be always, by having been with you, will always be carrying within me a sense of soul. I'll have a space in me I call the soul space that you have already made and continue to make with me. Please join me as we say our affirmation and the lighting of our chalice. Love is the spirit of this fellowship. And service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. I invite you to sing with me. It's number 360. Here we have gathered. The words will be here on the screen or on your screens if you're watching remotely. Please stand in body or spirit. I'm going to come back to the number one later. I think at this point I'd like to do milestones and passages. As a congregation, we have this ritual of coming together and allowing ourselves moments of vulnerability, bringing with us joys, perhaps successes or accomplishments, or perhaps bringing with us questions, concerns, or bringing with us sorrows, losses, struggles. Often we share these experiences, these milestones and passages just in silent presence. And sometimes we share them with words. And in our sharing, we know that we are seen and seeing and loved and loving others. Big milestone for the fellowship today. There was a ribbon cutting. And the children held the ribbons just about an hour ago. And the members of the Gateways team that's overseeing the roof project and will oversee the construction of the new wing, as well as the Deeper Roots and Wider Wings leadership, which is up until this point, they were saying, they were talking about all these projects that you've done, and they said, we paid cash. Pretty cool, I gotta say. And so up here is a tray of scissors that were part of the ribbon cutting. It was wonderful to dedicate and to bless the new roof, which was a big part of the celebration this morning. And from what I understand, having done some reading on the history of the fellowship, it may be the first time in your history your roof hasn't leaked somewhere. So congratulations. in our milestones and passages also. Please, thoughts and love to Nancy Lee McClure. She says, hi from Care 1. She was getting some medical care in the Morristown Hospital and then got COVID. And hopefully she will be going home early this week. And two of our newest members have an important milestone and passage to share. Kylie Garabed and Jenna Diefenbacher got engaged and celebrating with us this morning. I invite you to join me now in the spirit of meditation or contemplation or prayer as is best for you. All that we have been separately and all that we will become together, it's stretched out before us and behind us like stars scattered across a canvas of sky. We stand at the edge, arms locked together, arms locked like tandem skydivers, working up the courage to leap. Tell me, friends, what have we got to lose? Lose our fear of failure? Lose our mistrust of our own talents? What have we got to lose? A poverty of the spirit? That cosmic lie that we're alone? What wonders await us? Wonders that wait for us in the space, the sacred space between the first leap and the moment our feet or our wheels or however it is we move our bodies, that moment we touch down on precious earth. Touch down softly on unknown soil. What wonders await us? What have we got to lose that we can't replace with some previously unimaginable joy? Blessed are you, Spirit of life, who has sustained and sustains us, enlivens us, encourages us to reach a moment like this. Give us courage in our leaping, and gratitude in our landing, and compassion in our arriving. And share with us in the joy of a long and fruitful ministry, a legacy we have built, and a future we hand on. For what lives within us and among us. Amen. So be it. Blessed be. I'm going to invite you to sing number 1 in this hymn book. A couple of things about this particular hymn. First of all, I'm very fond of the hymn. It was the day after, one of the first congregations I served was the Columbine Unitarian Universalist Church in Littleton, Colorado. And when the shootings happened there, we opened the buildings we opened our sacred space, our soul space, if you will, to the community, and it was full. The next night, a space that we thought would seat 120 seated 220. And the community needed us. And the first song we sang was number 1. And it's meant a lot to me. It meant a lot to me before, but especially since that time. There is one thing about this song, if we were still using hymnals a lot. Oh, we got to change that slide.
I put the original title up there.
Oh, thank you. Original title, Prayer for This House. I so dislike the title that they gave it in 1991, May Nothing Evil. What kind of a title is that?
I don't know.
But
I thought I had to keep the original title so people could find the slide.
That makes sense.
But then I added the other thing.
All right, that works.
Just for you.
Thank you. I confess, in a congregation I served that had pencils, I had everybody pull these out and scratch out this title and write in Prayer for This House. That's how strongly I feel about it. It's a song worth knowing. There are times in congregational life that there's just a moment you just want to have something you can just fall into. And number one is one that I recommend for congregations when you're gathered in moments like that experience I had. Probably a little faster than with the kids. Yeah, great. Prayer for This House. I invite you to stand in body or spirit. May nothing
Sometimes I can't count.
There is plenty of room for all humanity in all its splendor. Now is the time in our service where we give and receive our weekly offering, and we believe that generosity changes lives. It changes the lives of people in our community, and it changes our own lives in the giving. Today's offertory will be donated 100% as a special collection to our partner church in Romania, which hosts origins of Unitarianism in Transylvania. This is now the Hungarian-speaking part of Romania. For 30 years, this fellowship has cultivated a collegial and mutually supportive relationship with a Unitarian congregation there, including a yearly Christmas gift and several visits to their congregation. And I'd like to, if you haven't already met our envoy to Partner Church, Gabor Kiss, is in the back. He's waving right now. You can read all about this and also talk with Gabor about this important ministry that we have. There is a link in this week's email blast. You can also search for Partner Church on our website or in the members menu on the homepage. And Gabor will be in the library after this service so that you can also visit the Partner Church Corner in the library, which was refreshed this summer, and our gift means so much to our Partner Church congregation, as you will see from the minister's greeting and thank you letter, which is posted there. Please be generous. Thank you.
I've mentioned before how much the congregation I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, means to me. And I was really delighted when Beth said she'd play I Have a Hammer. I'm just old enough that I would sing that as a young teen in our youth
I was
group.
in college.
Yeah. It was great having the care and leadership from that generation of folks when I was a young teen. You know, when I went into ministry, when I felt the call to ministry in this congregation, one of the things that I didn't realize in my excitement and my willingness to say yes to that sense of call to ministry was that I would leave those people, would leave that congregation. Perhaps even I was a little naive about it. A year or two would go by and I would have a milestone in my life. Maybe a child was born, or one of my children was born, or I was going to serve a new congregation. And there was always this sense of, wait a minute, shouldn't, they're not there. I'm not there. And I realized over the years that there was this soul space, I learned to call it, within myself. And I think of it as the congregation known as the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Columbus, Ohio. And it's still hard to talk about. Almost like there was this life that I had with them that I cherished so much. And I am so grateful that I get to do ministry, but I'm not with them, and that has turned out to have a sense, I've had a feeling of loss over the years. And they have become who they are, and there are people there that I've never met now. And yet, there is this place, an absence. Their absence is also proven to be a gift over the years, a soul space. I understand things about ministry from that open, loving space they created and left in me. I see that you have soul spaces among you, within you, for one another. Many congregations do. I have been part of 10 remarkable Unitarian Universalist congregations at this point in ministry. Every one of those congregations is beautiful, creates soul spaces that are the walls and the building, but within those walls and buildings, soul spaces, the living way of being with one another. Each of those congregations has their imperfections, their quirks that end up, they'll have workarounds as long as the congregation exists, like that congregation in Massachusetts, which still I understand doesn't take care of its buildings. Yet that congregation, not in my own experience, but I know that congregation, I think all of our congregations in some ways leave a place of love. The 10 congregations I've served and the 2 of which I've been a member have left soul spaces in me. So important is the soul space from that congregation in Columbus that when someone asks where I'm from, if I really have time to explain it, I say I am from them. They saved my life many times. They nurtured in me the things I most cherish about my life. And they were like every congregation, had their imperfections. Sometimes they hurt one another. The congregation sent me off to theological school in 1988. And there's this huge place of soul within me. And nothing can fill it. And that's really important to understand, that I've noticed that congregations and ministers create soul spaces within one another as well. And as an interim, I notice that when a minister leaves a congregation, which we all do, congregations carry on, ministers come and ministers go, because for us, the focus is the people of the congregation and how the spirit of life and love lives within them, the space they make among themselves for that loving, that spirit, that learning. So one thing as an interim minister that is important to note is that when you have a minister, say Allison Miller, no relation to Joel Miller, when a minister leaves, especially after 16 years, you have created some very powerful, deep relationships. And when they leave, it's very uncomfortable, and that's normal. That soul space that I have from that congregation in Columbus, there's always a little bit of a longing, a sense of loss in it, but there's also a great sense of joy and an understanding of ministry. And that's true of those soul spaces that ministers and congregations create in one another. And as an interim, one of the things I watch for is whether a congregation hurries to fill the soul space with something else. We'll just get somebody who fills that space really, really well. Or perhaps a congregation wants to just kind of package it up, put it in a box, and put it over on a shelf in the archives. Or some congregations will make a kind of memorial, even a shrine, to the person who was in that space. And then the sides of the space almost become impermeable and hard. The best thing to do with soul spaces is let them be uncomfortable and to cherish how they have come to be. Don't fill the spaces. Don't make memorials out of them. There's a web of relationships, and all of it alive, the spaces themselves alive. I minister from the soul spaces that congregations create in me. Soul spaces created by the love of people, the love of communities. I have soul spaces in me from other congregations as well. There's Glenn, the chair of my internship committee in Hayward, California. I was studying ministry at that point. He was the chair of my internship committee. Halfway through my internship, he got a terrible illness. And by the end of my internship, he was in hospice and would die. And as he lay on that hospice bed, he took my hand and said to me, "Thank you, and it's going to be fine." There's Frances in Littleton, Colorado. She cannot help herself. She has so much fun doing social justice, and she loves to do the annual pledge campaign because she says, "I give until it feels good, and I want to help you all do that too." And she does. And I miss them very much. I'm not sure as an interim how long I can keep falling in love with congregations and then leaving, because the interim ministers leave. That's our job. We're pre-fired, and for good reason. As soon as we're not pre-fired, the interim work stops happening. You don't want to do that. But it is hard to leave. And it's what makes it hard to leave that makes that space so powerful. Love comes to be in there. Those spaces energize social justice work, energize a warm, loving welcome of newcomers, care for our youth and our children, the deep relationships we create here with one another. A soul space becomes powerful when it will be deeply felt and when it is appreciated for what it once was and what it can now hold and what it can give birth to. So I've seen in congregations how they can use these soul spaces. So for example, in in a congregation in a very rural part of New York. When I was serving there, a woman drove 4 hours when I had arrived at this congregation. She drove 4 hours for a Sunday morning so she could tell me at the end of the service, I grew up in this congregation. There was no place I could call home in my life, no place, but this congregation. This congregation saved my life. And she wasn't talking metaphorically, she meant it literally. Or there's the congregation in Rochester, New York, that I served. And I watched how a group of transgender children in the youth program there would walk into the building and feel the weight of the world lifted from them. They could be who they were so freely and know that they were loved and welcomed and cherished for who they were by all people of all the ages, the smiles on the faces of parents and elders. And they told me straight out, you've saved our lives. And they didn't mean it metaphorically. They meant it. There's a congregation in Oregon where I got to know a member who'd been connected to that congregation, a member there for almost 4 decades. And when her husband and her children were killed in a strange and terrible accident, and she was on the edge of despair, that congregation brought her back to life and to love and gave her the support she needed to carry on with the grief she had, to hold those enormous soul spaces of a beloved family. Our congregation saved lives, and you've saved lives. I know you have. I've seen it. And you do it from these deep places of soul. It took me a while to understand the importance of a soul space. And there was a moment in my experience when I understood how important our ministry, our presence in a community can be. So when I was serving, as I mentioned earlier, I served as the founding minister along with the founding lay leaders of the Columbine Unitarian Universalist Church in Littleton, Colorado. And we got that congregation started in 1992. And we got started, and one of the first things that happened is I got an invitation from a friendly and kind minister of a Christian church not too far up the street, about a mile up the street. And it was an ecumenical gathering. It wasn't quite an interfaith gathering, although if I had been there, it would make it an interfaith gathering. But when I got there, I could see quizzical looks on the faces of the many ministers seated around the room. And then I saw the word going around, and it looked like they were saying, oh, that's the new Unitarian minister. And then some word went back, and I wasn't sure what it was. But when the word got back, not quite to me, most of the ministers got up and left. They wouldn't say hi to me, shake my hand, and that group never met again. It was a tough neighborhood. And some of those ministers were ministers of very large congregations, almost like megachurches, and they liked to think that they were setting the culture and tone of the neighborhood. In reality, they weren't, but they sure didn't like it like this new little Unitarian Universalist congregation. One of the first things we did, for example, was realizing the important role we played in the community. We put a rainbow flag on the roof of the building we were renting. And we had some banners out front. And we got a lot of calls. How dare you? It was just kind of harassing calls. And we knew we were having an effect. The banner got ripped down a couple of times. And so we thought, rather than worry about the banner getting ripped down, we decided to have a concert with a gay and lesbian chorus that would sing in the neighborhood. So we made arrangements for this chorus to come and sing in a concert. and we wanted to sell tickets. We went to the local newspaper to run some ads, the neighborhood paper, and they were like, oh no, we're not putting that ad in our paper. So we printed up, I think we printed up about 500 posters and made a big banner to go on the side of the church to advertise the concert with our phone number so folks could reserve tickets, say they were coming. And we got all of those up one day, spent a day putting them up, and 2 days later, somebody had gone through the entire neighborhood and taken them all down. Well, we were not going to be pushed around on this. We printed twice as many and put them all back up the next day. It was nice to have a very full meeting room the day of the concert. I got a call. It was about 1996. We didn't have an office staff yet, so I often was the one picking up the phone. And the phone rang one day. It was before this concert. And I picked it up and I said, Columbine Unitarian Universalist Church. And then there was a pause. Now, this is before cell phones, mind you. I resisted having one of these little doggies that thinks it's smarter than me. I resisted that as long as I could. So in those days, I could hear the sound of traffic. That meant a payphone. So I knew somebody was calling me from a payphone, not from a home or a business. And the pause was still there, so I said, this is Reverend Joel Miller. And then a young woman's voice said, does your church believe it's okay to be gay or lesbian? Now I'm thinking about, well, that's not one of our kids, because they would already know that answer. And I'm thinking about those other big churches who want to tell people if they're okay or not. And so I used language that I hoped would be helpful. And I said, this church believes that God loves you whether you're straight or gay or lesbian. Okay, thank you. I was like, wait a minute, whoa. The line was closed. So I didn't think much about that. After that, I hoped that whatever good I had sent into the universe had landed in some way. The congregation bought a new building shortly after that, renovated a building that got a great deal on it. Story very similar to here, where one of our members knew a little bit about real estate, was walking by one day and said, what, it's for sale? Got a building. And we got into the building and renovated it. Because it was our building, we put a really big rainbow flag on that roof and a really big banner proclaiming that we were welcoming and believed in the inherent worth and dignity of lesbians and gays and bisexuals and transgender and queer people. And the list actually goes on and on, but clearly we wanted people to know they're loved, that they have, by our first principle, inherent worth and dignity. So the day of the shootings in the high school, which was just 2 blocks up the street, and I knew something was happening because I could hear the shots. I don't normally wear a collar, but for that day, I grabbed the collar I owned and put it on and went up to the sheriffs, and they were glad to see me and put me to use that day. And I spent the day with families as they were reunited with their children coming out of the school. And the building that this congregation we had built together, this sacred space, truly became a soul space in the days that followed. The night that followed, we just opened the doors and had a service so people could find meaning and solace in the aftermath of what had happened. And a meeting hall that was designed to seat 120 had 220 people jammed into it, and people in classrooms listening, and probably more in the parking lot. Two days afterward, at this point we had a office administrator, and somebody came into the church office, and then I heard a knock on the door, and the administrator opened the door and said, somebody'd like to talk to you. And I went out, and here was a young woman, and she had two very old suitcases, very full of, looked like clothes and other things, and she was wearing a lot of clothes herself. And I invited her into my office, and she sat down, and she said to me that she really appreciated our rainbow flag and the banner in front, and then explained to me that it was her birthday. She was 18 years old that day, and that she had just come out as a lesbian to her family the night before, and they had told her that by the end of the morning they wanted her out of the house. She was not to talk to them, communicate with them ever again. And then I said, we will do what we can to help you and get you established. And she said, she looked at me and she said, you saved my life. And I looked at her because I thought, wait a minute, you just landed, okay. And she said, I called you. I knew I was a lesbian from the time I was a young girl. And there was no one. There was no way for me to know if I would be okay, and I was getting to the point where I thought that the only way to make things okay would be to kill myself. She said, I saw the posters, and I said, oh my gosh, you called. I remember. She said, yes. And after I talked to you, I knew I would be okay. There was a whole group of people telling me I would be okay. She'd never been in the building, but she'd seen the posters. She'd driven by. The family had driven by the building and its rainbow flag and its banners. And she didn't mean metaphorically, she meant literally. We talked for a long time. It was pretty clear that that a Unitarian Universalist congregation wasn't quite where she needed to land. Her personal relationship with Jesus was very important still in her theology. And I knew this amazing, awesome colleague, a woman who was the minister of a Methodist church in Denver, and I called her up. And she said, I'll be down in 15 minutes. And that young woman had a good place to land, a place to take her in. I finally, and then in that moment, as I watched this young woman get into my colleague's car and begin her new life, I understood what a soul space can do, how important it is, how important our congregations are, and realized that, oh my gosh, we save lives. It wasn't just me, it was her. And then in each congregation I've served since, literally seeing how you save lives. So when I came here, I was excited to come here because I knew this about you. You've done this kind of ministry. You're generous and deeply committed to each other and to people you may never meet. You've made a difference. You've taken a legacy and built on it. And this congregation will continue to make a difference. One so powerful that it saves lives. You've created sacred spaces in which we create soul spaces. It is beautiful, holy work. And I'm so glad I get to share it with you in these months to come. I invite you to sing with me as we close our service. It's number 1064 in the teal hymnals, and the words are up here on the screen. I invite you to stand in body or spirit as you would like.
Oh, be glad.
In the spaces of love and care and even loss, we offer this light to ourselves and one another, that we may go into the world and from that light find our way and find the strength from within to move this world even just one word closer to a world that is filled with love, to a world filled with compassion, with joy. Go with this care of the spaces within you and the power of soul that lives among you and from each of you. And when the light feels dim or the space is too much, know that we will be here for one another again and again. Go in peace, be in peace. Thank you.